My name is Mayani Contown, and I'm going to talk about the book David Walker's Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World. The book is written by David Walker, who was an abolitionist, anti slave advocate, and an evangelical Christian. This last part is relevant because his religion in Christianity gave him the background to be able to criticize those who enslaved Africans in the name of Christianity. During enslavement and the Atlantic slave trade, the reason that a lot of white Americans and Europeans gave for enslaving Africans was that it was in the Bible or that there were specific quotes and texts and verses in the Bible that to them were interpreted as putting those with a darker skin tone lower and putting them down. And that was their um, excuse for slavery. However, David Walker, as a Christian, read the Bible himself and experienced God in his own way and therefore discovered that this excuse was bogus and a lot of white Christians just used it as a scapegoat to perform unspeakable terrors upon another race. This book mostly condemned the harsh treatment of blacks and those that perpetuated such treatment. So there was a lot of criticism in the book mm, about how there was a specific group and a specific race that thought they were superior to another, mainly the whites against the blacks, and they instilled these rules and regulations that allowed violence and indenture towards blacks. And even after slavery was mostly abolished, there was still wide anti-black racism, and there was several years of harsh treatment towards blacks, and it still goes on today. And while the book condemned this harsh treatment, it was also a call to action for black people. As the name suggests, an appeal to the colored people of the world. The book was not written to let white people know about their issues. It was written to black people to let them know that they can no longer stand for this violence and that they need to speak up for their rights. So just to give a bit of just a setting of what happened during this time, reforms were being made as it was post-worldwide or nationwide slavery, but racism was still very prevalent. There was a lot of racist ideals. As I said, it was directly after slavery. And for example, there's a lot of people in high positions of power, for example, Thomas Jefferson, who had a lot of ideals and said a lot of things. For example, him saying that all blacks or all freed African Americans should be sent to colonize Africa. And this plan was finalized to avoid white and black mixing because he believed that whites should be kept separate from blacks to keep their purity. And David Walker even criticized Jefferson for this and blamed him for this because him being in such a position of power, being a founding father and a president, made a lot of normal people and citizens of America think it was okay to have anti-black ideals and incite anti-black violence. A book like this had never been published before, and since it heavily criticized white Americans who were in power, it put Walker at great risk. It was published in several newspapers and journals in the North, but he did want to get it down to the South because that is where his main audience was, the incapacitated blacks. So he heavily relied upon readers and the Underground Railroad spreading the news about the book and educating others about it. And as it was illegal in the South to educate blacks, to teach them how to read and write, there were educators in the Underground Railroad who read this book out to them and let them know about it. some very important points and some very powerful verses or passages in the book are and the book as a whole is very powerful, but one of the good ones that in particular spoke to me is, "Are we men? I ask you, O my brethren, are we men? Did our Creator make us to be slaves to dust and ashes like ourselves? Are they not dying worms as well as we? Have they not to make their appearance before the tribunal of heaven to answer for the deeds done in the body as well as we? Have we any other master but Jesus Christ alone? Is he not their master as well as ours? What right then have we to obey and call any other master but himself? How we could be so submissive to a gang of men, whom we cannot tell whether they are as good as ourselves or not, I never could conceive. However, this is shut up with the Lord, and we cannot precisely tell. But I declare, we judge men by their works." Here, we see that Walker is making reference to the fact that all humans are born, live, and die in the same way, and that no race is born with any qualities that makes them equal to the other one. And as a Christian, he knows that all races, all people, regardless of their race or their sex or their gender, can only answer to Jesus Christ. Therefore, no race has the right to be called master by another race. And another important point that he makes is that you cannot tell whether there is nothing that the white people say that gives evidence that they are better than the blacks. The biggest piece of evidence that they gave was a verse in the Bible, which had been disputed by Walker, and apart from that, their characters in question, only the Lord knows how good they are. So Walker's argument is that they're all the same. We're all the same, generally. The book also has a lot of biblical references because, and I think this is very relevant for this time, because at this time, a lot of blacks had not only come to the light of God, but they also had formulated their own type of Christianity, and their type of Christianity focused more on salvation of blacks and of them being freed. And so him including biblical references as a Christian also spoke to the millions of new black Christians that had just come into Christianity, just discovered Christianity, and it spoke to a lot of people, and it just in general made it very relatable for them. So a very good point about this book is that instead of sparking resistance in the South, which a lot of people thought something like this would spark resistance, but it didn't. There already was resistance. There would have been resistance, there would have been a revolution either way, because the people had had enough. The North had started getting freed blacks, and the South just hadn't been following. But what this book actually did was that it served as motivation to those who read it. So to those who were getting whipped for resisting and needed courage to run away, they would turn to this book, they would turn to David Walker's words, and they would find solace and peace in what he wrote. To conclude my reflection, I just want to quote another line from his book. "The whites want slaves and want us for their slaves, but some of them will curse the day they ever saw us. As true as the sun ever shone in its meridian splendor, my color will root some of them out of the very face of the earth." And I feel like this is such a wonderful call and just an omen to black people becoming equal at some point in time, even if it's not now, even if it's not today in 2021, but at some point, white people will have to stand up and see the equality. Thank you.